Be the jury in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony. Find the defendant guilty.
What I hope it means for the people is that we're clear that when we organize, we win. That guilty verdict, the people got it.
I'm cautiously optimistic that some real systemic changes begin to occur.
I do think now is the time for thoughtful conversation about what next.
The news at 6 starts right now. Good evening and thanks for being with us on this Tuesday. I'm Raj Mathai.
And I'm Jessica Aguirre. A swift verdict leading to an emotional response across America. Tonight there is plenty of action and plenty of reaction in the Bay Area as well. Let's start in Minneapolis, where people continue to gather in the streets hours after a jury found former police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all charges. He now faces what could be a maximum of 40 years in prison for killing George Floyd. President Biden, Vice President Harris spoke about the impact that this has on every single American.
Most men and women who wear the badge serve their communities honorably. But those few who fail to meet that standard must be held accountable, and they were today.
We are all a part of George Floyd's legacy, and our job now is to honor it and to honor him.
Now, before speaking to the nation, the president and the vice president spoke to Floyd's family on the phone following that verdict.
The death of George Floyd sparked protests, as we know, across the country last year. Tonight, it's a more muted celebration for many people and a chance for meaningful change. Let's bring in NBC's Jay Gray, who joins us this evening in Minneapolis. Jay, about 8 p.m. your time there in Minnesota. What's the emotion there at this hour?
Hey, Raj, Jess, I think it's twofold. I think you've got overwhelming relief and joy. There is happiness here tonight, hours after Derek Chauvin was walked from the courtroom in handcuffs, found guilty of manslaughter and murder.
We, the jury in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty.
The decision was swift.
As to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty.
And powerful.
Count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty.
Derek Chauvin, guilty on all 3 counts. The former Minneapolis police officer, now a convicted murderer. The jury took just 10.5 hours to find Chauvin responsible for the death of George Floyd after restraining him with his knee across his neck for more than 9 minutes last summer.
Now, no verdict can bring George Perry Floyd back to us. But this verdict does give a message to his family that he was somebody, that his life mattered.
We came for one thing and one thing only. Yes. That was justice for George Floyd. Yes. And today, that's what we got.
Yeah. Hundreds are gathering outside the courthouse, many who've marched for the better part of a year demanding justice for Floyd.
I'm just so grateful because it's been so much anxiety. So I'm so grateful for this.
A crowd is also spilling into the streets in what's now known as George Floyd Square, the place where Floyd was killed. Yeah, and this all taking place under the watchful eye of intense and very visible security here, Jess and Raj. We've got more than 3,000 National Guard troops, military vehicles, more than 1,500 police and federal agents on the ground. I think it's important to point out, to this point, there have been no serious incidents here.
All right, thank you very much, Jay. That was Minnesota, but what about here? When the verdict came down, our reporters fanned out across the Bay Area to hear what the people here had to say. From the South Bay to San Francisco, that's where we find Ginger Conejero Saab at 24th and Mission. Ginger joins us with activists who gathered there to celebrate, and really, Ginger, to also talk about the work that lies ahead.
The police are not here to defend.
That's right, Jessica. That is the big message. The work is not done. That's the big message here in San Francisco on Mission and 24th, where members of the Party of Socialism and Liberation and other community activists gathered after today's guilty verdict on former officer Derek Chauvin. Now, these activists say the push for police reform and justice for other men who have died in police-related incidents continues. You know, Jessica, one of the names remembered in this neighborhood today, Sean Monterosa, who grew up in San Francisco and was shot by Vallejo police last year.
Even though Derek Chauvin was convicted, justice is bitter felt. It's very bittersweet. And so we know that convicting policemen is one step towards liberating our communities and ending police terror in our neighborhoods.
Now, the gathering here on Mission and 24th has been peaceful so far. We've seen numerous SFPD cars making the rounds in the neighborhood, making sure that everything remains that way. Other names that have also been mentioned, calling for police reform and justice for men who have died at the hands of police. Alex Nieto, again, Sean Monterosa, and one name that was added just in the last 5 minutes, Micaiah Bryant, who is a teenage girl in Cleveland. Apparently, she was shot as well today as the verdict was being handed down. We're live here in San Francisco. Conejero Saab, NBC Bay Area News.